morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to highlight and advance efforts to support post-secondary food security. My name is Amy Magathos, Assistant Director of Policy and Planning at the Washington Student Achievement Council. My work centers on WASAC's strategic priority of supporting students' basic needs. I have the privilege of co-hosting today's webinar with Dr. Erin Frazier with the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges. She focuses on student support policy within workforce education. My colleague Ellen Matheny, an Assistant Director at WASAC, is our tech expert today. And we are joined by 9 remarkable presenters from colleges, community organizations, and the Department of Social and Health Services, whom we'll introduce throughout our agenda this morning. Next slide, please. Our intention for today's webinar on post-secondary food security is to expand collaboration in Washington by strengthening a shared understanding of post-secondary food insecurity, sharing policy efforts to expand student access to basic food benefits, learning from campus-based strategies, and inviting you to participate in action opportunities. In our agenda, we'll begin with a brief overview of what we know about post-secondary food insecurity in Washington and hear from a student perspective. We'll explore current federal policy efforts as well as the state legislation being implemented. Then we'll hear from colleges on successful campus-based strategies. We have so much to learn from what they've developed already with partners. We'll conclude with opportunities to take action and continue the learning about supporting students' basic needs. Before we start, just a few housekeeping notes. Due to a packed agenda and a really large turnout, everyone has been muted upon entry. You are welcome to type in the questions box at any time, though, and we're going to have an opportunity for presenters to answer those questions after our campus presentations and also at the end of the webinar. We are recording this session and we'll send a link to everyone who registered and we'll post it on the WASAC website. Finally, we want to acknowledge the many sectors represented among our 320 plus participants today. Community and technical colleges, baccalaureate institutions, public and independent colleges, and our nonprofit and public agency partners. Thank you all for joining us to give some intentional focus to helping our students gain food security and the space to focus on their education. Next slide, please. In our current health and economic crises, we recognize the serious and racially disproportionate impacts on Washington college students' basic needs that many of you are seeing in your campus communities. And while food security is our focus today, we also recognize that it's interrelated with different aspects of students' basic needs, including housing, mental and behavioral health, childcare, and other really foundational needs. To give us a national snapshot of the impact of these crises on post-secondary basic needs, the Hope Center for College, Community, and Justice completed a national survey of over 38,000 post-secondary students in April and May this year. With what is likely to be an undercount, it showed that nearly 3 in 5 students are experiencing basic needs insecurity, with significant racial disparities in the impacts. 38% at 4-year institutions and 44% at 2-year institutions reported experiencing food insecurity. Next slide, please. However, even before the current health and economic crisis that we're facing, we've been aware that food insecurity has long been impacting college student success. How prevalent, though, is food insecurity among college students in Washington? The truth is, we currently only have limited information about it statewide. I'll share some student data in my next slide, but first a word on where we are with college basic needs assessments that help us know what's happening across our state. First, there are several individual colleges that are making efforts to assess food insecurity. Some institutions collected data about students' basic needs from assessment questions in larger surveys they were already conducting, and some fielded surveys specific to basic needs. However, we don't currently know how many colleges are assessing basic needs, and the data may not be comparable to gain a statewide picture. In spring 2019, the University of Washington, for example, shared research about the prevalence of food and housing insecurity across all 3 of their campuses, including both undergrad and graduate students. And in our past academic year, there has been an increase in Washington public colleges and universities surveying students to better understand the extent of needs on their campuses. Most community and technical colleges this past year used the Hope Center's Basic Needs Survey, and with the 6 colleges in the pilot program supporting students experiencing homelessness based on 2019 legislation, some colleges added aligned questions in currently used campus surveys. So going forward, the Student Achievement Council and the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges are encouraging all colleges to participate in basic needs surveying. First, so that individual campuses can understand the prevalence of food insecurity and other basic needs among their students. And second, so that we can coordinate assessments and data to get a better picture in Washington of the prevalence of food and housing insecurity. This data is really essential to build the case with policymakers, partners, and funders on basic needs impact on student success. Next slide, please. So now on to the clearest current picture that we have across the state of basic needs from multiple campuses. So as I said, in fall 2019, 28 of 34 community and technical colleges fielded the Hope Center's Real College Survey with 13,550 students responding. But first, a definition. What do we mean by food insecurity, and how is that used in this survey? This survey defined food insecurity as the limited or uncertain availability of nutritionally adequate and safe food, or the ability to acquire such food in a socially acceptable manner. The most extreme form is often accompanied by physiological sensations of hunger. The survey assesses food security among students using the U.S. Department of Agriculture's 18-item set of questions. So, in the survey, during the last 30 days prior to the survey, approximately 41% of respondents from Washington CTCs experienced food insecurity, with 16% assessed at the low level and 25% at the very low level of food security. More than 1 in 3 respondents reported that they ran short on food in the previous month, and more than 1 in 4 said that they went hungry. In addition, the study identified significant disparities with people of color and marginalized identities, with Indigenous students reporting the highest rate of food insecurity by race and ethnicity at 57% of respondents. So I'd like to note, in addition, that students with certain life circumstances also reported higher rates of food insecurity. 41% of students who had served in the military, 55% of parenting students, 67% of students who have been in foster care reported food insecurity in the previous month. These data were gathered last fall, and with the economic crisis, we expect that the current state picture might look even more severe. Next slide, please. So what do we know about supports to address this? Food security supports, including campus food pantries, are increasing across Washington, and you're going to hear more about some of those campus strategies today. The rise in pantries and their frequent use serve as really strong indicators of students' need. But of course, pantries can't provide sustainable solutions for food security at the scale these data indicate. Food benefits are also part of the puzzle. So basic food, as we know it in Washington, or SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, as well as programs like Women, Infants, and Children, or the WIC program, can provide some food stability for those who are eligible. However, even when food security resources are available, students may not be aware of them, may assume that they aren't eligible, or may not know who to ask for help. Nationally, an estimated 57% of college students at risk of food insecurity who would be eligible for food benefits did not receive them. One study's estimate for Washington was that only 21% of eligible college students receive SNAP benefits. Next slide, please. Students provide another critical perspective on what we know about post-secondary food security. So Jacqueline Diaz, a junior in pre-nursing at WSU Tri-Cities, can share some thoughts and observations from her experiences. I'm so glad you can be with us today, Jacqueline. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and experiences.
Yeah, hello. So can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I would say that some of, like, I guess with my experience at working at the cupboard, I would say that a lot of students, like, I would say they're afraid or they're not sure if they need it enough to be able to ask for the assistance. I would say a lot of students are afraid of going in there. So I would say, I know one of the students, I live on campus, so one of the students had been having trouble, but he was afraid to ask for help, but I knew him because I live on campus, and so we just spoke to him, and he had talked to us about not having a job and having food insecurity. So we went ahead and talked to him and told him that the cupboard was open for all the students. And I think something really important is to have it, like, to make it highly available and let students know that they can come in. And just, I think the most important thing is giving a positive environment to give students the, to give students like the courage to come in and ask for help. And then also with having the cupboard open, we do have some barriers. I would say some barriers are having the proper food for all students, since some of them have dietary restrictions, and some of the food we don't have access to. So I think that's something that we really need to work on, because there's people that are vegan, vegetarian, and then because of religion and stuff, they don't eat meat. And then also having fresh produce for students. I think that's another big thing. Let me see. Oh, and then we've also had a lot of changes with everything going on with the pandemic. So what we've done now, since campus has been closed since I think like late March. So what we've done is we've had like kind of like a mobile delivery. So what we do is we make pre-made boxes, and then we we had 2 locations around Tri-Cities, one in Pasco and one in Kennewick, where students could go and pick up boxes that were already pre-made. So they would just go there, and then we were there from 9 to 11, so they had 2 hours. They could go pick up whatever they needed. So I think that was something that we've changed during COVID. And then let me see. Oh, another thing that I think it has been really helpful for our students. Some students throughout the semester don't have time to come in, or we're not open in the hours where they're free. So what they can do online is we have an option where they can fill out an online order, and then they just put in the date and then select what they need or what they want, and then the number of family members that it will be for, to give us an idea of how many items we need to put in the box. And then they can select the date and then come in whenever works best for them. So I think that is some of the things that have made it easier, I guess, for students to access the food on campus. Let's see. And then, does anybody have any other like questions or anything?
We do have a moment, Jacqueline, where we have a question that's come up. What can we do to make students feel more welcome in the pantry, to break down some of those barriers? So if you could just say a word or two.
Yeah, like I think just having like the student workers, because there is a lot of people that come in and then they kind of just peek their head in, but they don't really feel comfortable like asking like if they can grab something. And I think just having somebody there like telling them that it's okay to come in, and like if they have any questions on who can come in. And I think just having kind of like I think it's the way you like greet people, and then the way like it's advertised on campus, which we let students know that anybody can come in. And then we do have like resources on our website that answer any questions. So I think it's just kind of like them kind of reaching out, but then us as well, like answering any questions that they might have.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jacqueline.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jacqueline, for sharing your experience with us today. We really, truly appreciate your time and expertise to help guide our continued work to ensure student food security on our campuses. And a big thank you to everyone joining us for this conversation this morning. My name's Erin Fraser. I am very grateful to be in this conversation with you today. We're now going to spend a little time providing an overview of the national and state policy environments related to food security. There remain to be challenges, yet through many partnerships, we have made great strides in policy change to support post-secondary food insecurity. So to share what is happening on the national scene, it is with great pleasure that I introduce Christina Wong, Director of Public Policy and Advocacy at Northwest Harvest, and Claire Lane, Director of the Anti-Hunger and Nutrition Coalition. Next slide, please. Oh, and you already are there. Thank you.
Hi all, I'm Claire Lane. I'm the director of the Anti-Hunger and Nutrition Coalition, and we work on state and federal policy advocacy. And it's been such a pleasure over the last year or two working with these two organizations and on behalf of college students to really look at how we can expand access to these critical benefits. Today, I'm going to talk about what's happening at the federal level, and my colleague Christina is going to talk about steps that folks can take today and in the coming weeks to make sure that in this current crisis, that Congress is really responding to the need and adapting current policy to make sure that college students aren't left out of the relief that's needed. So as folks might know, to qualify for SNAP, if you're enrolled in college, there is currently a requirement that college students also have to be working 20 hours a week to get that essential food assistance. In an earlier package from Congress, there was a nationwide temporary waiver of the SNAP limits for people who were able-bodied adults without dependents. On the slide, you see that ABAWDs, that's able-bodied adults without dependents, who also have this 20-hour-a-week work requirement. But that work requirement, that time limit, was waived for most of that adult population, but it did not include the work requirement for post-secondary students. So while almost every other adult was given that relief and given that opportunity to apply for and qualify for SNAP, students were left out of that. So we know in this current environment with massive job losses and lots of college students who have qualified for SNAP have qualified because they had campus jobs. We know this is an extremely important change that needs to happen in the next COVID package. So we've been working very closely with our congressional delegation to see that that change happens in this next and likely last COVID package from Congress. So that's one of the policy changes we've been working on since March when this all happened. The other one has been just the question of how adequate SNAP benefit levels are in this current time. We know that even for folks on SNAP, people face food insecurity because there isn't a ton of money that households get. There is, the way SNAP benefits are calculated, a maximum benefit for the household size you have. And Congress in March raised that benefit level to that maximum amount for all households. So while that was a great thing that every household now qualifies for the maximum benefit, and that helped about 60% of the SNAP caseload across the country, for 40%, they were already poor enough to qualify for the maximum amount. So what Congress did was helpful to a little bit more than half the folks, but not for the 40% that need the help the most. So ironically, in a time when Congress was scrambling to help people, they helped the people that didn't need it maybe quite as much as the folks at the lowest end of the income scale. So the other question we're looking at is, how do we raise SNAP for all households by 15%? So those are our two SNAP priorities. There's other issues around suspending any new rule changes that the administration is requiring and proposing that might limit SNAP access and limit SNAP benefits. The House HEROES Act suspended those rules from being implemented. We're looking for that in this next package from the Senate as well. The other issue that is so critical, we know in Washington State, there has been long-standing research that shows that households that are food insecure are also housing insecure and vice versa. And clearly we saw that in the data around college students. So there are two really big housing priorities that we're looking at as well. One is a nationwide eviction moratorium. In Washington State, we have a statewide one that expires August 1st. We're looking for a nationwide moratorium so that in this time of stress, folks don't lose their job and their home. We're also looking for Congress to provide $200 billion in rent assistance, about $2 billion of which would come to Washington State, because we know just in June, something like 175,000 households were not able to pay their rent. So those are our housing and food assistance needs. And what we're hearing is today, this webinar is really well timed because the Senate is expected to release their package as soon as this afternoon. So this timing could not be more important. The Senate will release their plan. There'll be negotiations between the Senate Republicans and the Senate Democrats. And because what the Senate comes out with will be fundamentally different than what the House came out with in June in the HEROES Act, there will then be negotiations with the House. So the Senate has to have their own negotiations internally. And then once they've come to a final package and a vote, then they will be negotiating with the House. So I want to turn this over to my colleague, Christina Wong, and she can talk about what that means for you and what you can do to raise your voice and make sure these provisions are included. Next slide.
Thank you, Claire. Hi, I'm Christina Wong. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy at Northwest Harvest, and it's my pleasure to also join this wonderful panel today talking about this incredibly important issue. Sorry for the Hamilton reference. It's a bit of a obsession in my household right now for my 9-year-old and 6-year-old. But the phrase that we all think about when we hear about from Hamilton, don't throw away our shot, don't throw away my shot, or I won't throw away my shot. We're asking you not to throw away our shot at getting important expansions to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, in this COVID package. As Claire was saying, this is really a critical time. The Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, has stated publicly to the press that he is not going to put another package on the floor for a vote for the rest of the calendar year, that this is our last chance before the end of the calendar year to pass a COVID relief package that will provide relief to so many people who are struggling because of this pandemic. And this critical time period is really over the next couple of weeks. Congress usually goes on recess for the entire month of August. What we are hearing is that the plan is to depart DC on August 8th. The House has openly stated that they will not leave until we have a COVID package that is passed, but we have not heard similar commitment from the Senate. And as Claire also said, today is the day that we are expecting to hear the Republican Senate package that will be released this afternoon. Some of it is already being leaked to the press, and it is not looking good for nutrition priorities. Rather than thinking that this is not anything we can do about it, this is the time when we have to be even louder and calling on our Senate as well as our members of Congress to let them know these priorities are important to me for these reasons, and to be unwavering in insisting that these priorities be included in the final COVID package. So to help you out, there's some tools that we have available for you. If the bottom bullet point that you see on here, what you can do from Northwest Harvest, this is Northwest Harvest's most recent advocacy alert that we sent this past Monday. You'll see when you click on the link a reference to Monday, there was a nationwide call-in day of action for SNAP. That doesn't mean you missed your opportunity to speak up, because as Claire said, negotiations will be happening, and we want to keep the pressure on throughout this period until there is a final package that is passed by both chambers and on the president's desk for signing. So if you click on the link, you'll see several tools that are available to use. One is a link for making a phone call. When you click on that link and you enter in your physical address, it'll automatically pull up phone scripts for our senators and then a separate phone script for your member of Congress. You can read the script. I would really emphasize you personalize that list in some way, even if it's just to say these issues are really important to me. But if you have a story to share, then that's all the better. You can, once you make those phone calls, you just let us know that you made a phone call, and that's great. Another link on there is to send an email. You can follow up on your phone call, reiterating what you said in your phone call in the email message as your way of personalizing the template that's available for that. I do want to say that the scripts for senators, we purposely led off with a thank you, because we know that both Senator Murray and Senator Cantwell, we have their support for protecting and strengthening SNAP. They have been unwavering in their support for the SNAP program in the past, but the language is nuanced because we want them to know that this is so important to us that they need to be strong in negotiations and make sure that those those make it into a final package. And this is a message particularly for Senator Murray, because she is in leadership for the Democrats on the Senate side and will be eating all this information to Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, insisting on keeping those priorities in the package. The other thing you'll see on that link is you can post a selfie video or a picture of yourself with your handwritten message using hashtag BoostSnapNow. And in your message, if you do a video, it can be brief, just between 30 seconds to a minute. Post it on Twitter and tag our senators with that hashtag. Messages can do anything from talking about what you've been hearing on this webinar today. If you have a personal story to share, letting our senators know that SNAP is an important economic generator as well as an important and effective anti-poverty and anti-hunger tool. The last thing I wanted to bring into your attention is if you click on the link that's in the last bullet point that says sign onto a letter using this link and using your organization's name using this Google form, that is a link to a letter from the Hope Center that is specifically about the policy change to waive the work requirement for post-secondary students to access SNAP. Another thing you can do when you are calling or sending your email to Senator Murray is to thank her for that work, because she has really been championing that issue and is sponsoring that bill in the Senate right now. But this letter adds on to the priorities that Claire mentioned, because why not go for it? Don't throw away the shot and go for a complete package about ways that expanding SNAP helps all different people in this current environment, and particularly speaking from your experience about what it can do for post-secondary students. So please make sure that you take action. You can do it today. We'll likely be sending out another alert summarizing what we see in the Senate package and re-emphasizing taking these actions, because again, it's not looking good for seeing SNAP in the current Republican package, but that doesn't mean that we can't speak up and ask them to do more. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire and Christina, for joining us today and for sharing your knowledge about this topic and for your continued food security advocacy. Next slide, please. Next, we'd like to share some of the work that has happened within the last year to increase access to food and SNAP for post-secondary students. And I'm very happy to be joined by Babs Roberts, Director for the Community Service Division of the Department of Social and Health Services today. We'd like to frame some of the work being done in the state with the passage of Second Substitute House Bill 1893, sponsored by Representative Entenman during the last legislative session. The bill highlighted the need to address post-secondary student food insecurity and provided several directions for investigation and action. We'll be providing an overview and update on several of these, including the new Student Emergency Assistance Grant Program, efforts to allow the use of EBT cards on college campuses, new work study allowance for SNAP eligibility, an investigation of categorical eligibility between the Washington College Grant and SNAP, and a few of the system-wide efforts to increase SNAP awareness and uptake for post-secondary students at community and technical colleges. Next slide, please. So to get us started, the Student Emergency Assistance Grant Program was created by Second Substitute House Bill 1893 to provide a select number of community and technical colleges with funds to provide directly to students experiencing emergencies impacting their ability to attend classes and stay enrolled. This includes students experiencing food insecurity as well as other basic needs. And in establishing this program, several key elements were given focus to ensure equitable access to this resource for students. Access to SEAG funds must be low barrier. This means not requiring students to provide documentation of need, instead trusting a student when they ask for help and making sure funds are dispersed within 4 days so the emergency doesn't escalate. Program colleges must also ensure all students needing emergency assistance are eligible, not just those that we traditionally define as needy students. SEAG funds are not for tuition. They are to provide monetary aid to students to assist them in, for example, purchasing food or other goods and services needed in order for the student to continue attending classes. In addition, colleges must engage in meaningful follow-up with students to build relationships and connect students to additional resources beyond the monetary aid. At this point, program colleges have just completed the first 6 months of implementation and exhausted funding very quickly in those 6 months. We will be presenting a first, although partial, year report that will highlight insights from this program related to student food insecurity, as well as other basic needs. And our hope is for this work to also contribute to our state's understanding of student food insecurity and provide recommendations for further action in the future. Now I'd like to turn things over to Babs to share a bit more about many other actions that have occurred. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Erin. Hi, everybody. I'm going to start by apologizing because I have been disconnected from the slide, so I'm going to wing it from my notes. I think I know where the slide breaks are, though. So let me just reiterate. My name is Babs Roberts, and I am the Director for the Community Services Division for Washington State at the Department of Social and Health Services. Essentially what that entails, and I think the how I relate to this conversation is that I am the SNAP and cash assistance area of state government. So my organization, my teams are out there doing eligibility for these programs, and then hopefully being able to provide some additional employment and training services. And I have had the honor and pleasure of working with these ladies for a very long time, all of these ladies, and I'm deeply grateful to be here and to be able to share some information with you today. In terms of, and I would like to provide just a little bit of background around SNAP for those of you who may not know. Supplemental Nutrition Assistance is the federally funded food benefit that is the predominant source of food benefits in the state, but there is a small state-funded program that mirrors that is called Food Assistance for Legal Immigrants. And the two programs together form the basic food program for Washington State. The eligibility for both is pretty much the same. But the Food Assistance for Legal Immigrants program is primarily focused at immigrants who are living in this country, legally entering this country, but don't yet have 5-year status in order to be eligible for federal benefits. So having said that, I would say what I want to talk about a little bit is that, you know, food benefits are issued on what's called an EBT card, electronic benefit transfer card. It looks very much like any debit or credit card that you might have in your wallet. Part of the House Bill 1893 that we were intensely focused on was the idea that the piece of that bill that asked us to find a way for students who are already eligible for SNAP or FAP or basic food to be able to use those EBT cards on campus. And I think this is a really big issue for students who are, that very small percentage that Amy talked about earlier, that are receiving basic food benefits, have a secondary barrier, even though they've overcome that hurdle, got those benefits, but they're not able to use them in most cases on campus. You have to go off campus to use those benefits, and that is often problematic, especially I think in rural areas. So on July 17th, in accordance with House Bill 1893, we did submit a waiver to the federal government, and we have to do that, submit that waiver to the federal government, because currently federal rules do not allow for the use of EBT cards for hot and prepared food. So we're not allowed to allow people to use their EBT cards, for instance, in a college campus cafeteria. But other stores on campus could potentially become eligible for to become EBT retailers, and there's a whole process I'm going to talk about in a minute around that. But on July 17th last year, 2019, we did submit a waiver to the federal government asking for permission to allow retail food establishments on college campuses to accept EBT cards. And essentially what we're doing was to ask to waive that rule and allow for students to purchase on campuses. USDA, Food and Nutrition Services section of USDA, denied that waiver fairly quickly for them. By October, we had a denial. And they suggested in their denial letter a number of things. One, that food retailers on campuses could already meet the federal requirements to become a retailer, and they needed only to apply to USDA to get that. And, the second thing they said is that Washington could opt into what is called a restaurant meals program. This is a very problematic program in that we would have to allow for all restaurants to allow across the state, not just college campuses, to allow for EBT purchases. And that becomes very problematic. And it is only limited to elderly, disabled, or homeless clients, not all clients. And then the third thing they said was that we should potentially work on a demonstration project with college campuses that could and would evaluate and measure the impact of doing such a broader waiver on SNAP household consumption of nutritious foods. And I'm going to talk about that next. So our plan B, now that we've done this and we've gotten denied from USDA, our plan B was to submit, and we have done this by December of last year, submitted a waiver request to USDA to do exactly that, to pick a few campuses where we thought would be beneficial, and we haven't done that yet, but pick a few campuses and allow for them under a demonstration waiver to allow students to purchase with their EBT card hot and prepared meals in restaurants or on cafeterias, and potentially in the school stores and other areas of the campus food. And then track how that one impacts food insecurity for those students, and potentially then how that might be helping those students to, by having more nutritious meal, by not having the stress of worrying about where their next meal is coming from, by reducing that sort of anxiety and stress for them, would that have an impact potentially on their success as a student? And then the idea behind doing a demonstration project like this is that we could then show USDA the efficacy of actually allowing for this to happen in these situations. We submitted that waiver to USDA in December, and we have not yet heard back from them. The third plan we had, in working very closely with Washington Student Achievement Council and the State Board for Community Colleges, is to work to help college retailers, setting aside cafeterias with hot meals potentially, but working with the colleges and the stores and retailers on those colleges to provide some technical assistance so they could understand the USDA requirements to become an EBT retailer and what they would need to do in order to do that. And we had been working before this COVID crisis to develop and create an online webinar that would help to orient campus teams to this retailer process. What are the resources and supports that we could provide them? What will they need to know? And determine which colleges might be interested in moving forward with that, and then hold some more detailed workshops with our partners at the federal government, Food and Nutrition Services, to help them prepare and actually submit those applications. So that's sort of the big plan A, B, and C around how do we help students who are eligible use their benefits in a way that is helpful to them on campuses. So I think next slide, please. Yeah?
Yep. Yes, next slide, work study.
Work study, thank you. So one of the other things that we did look at was how we were interpreting federal rule. Many students, as part of their financial aid package, will be awarded work study. But not all students either accept a work study position or actually end up getting one because they're limited, I think. I'm going back like 30 years to my own college time. So, but SNAP rules do state that students in a higher education taking at least 6 credits must meet either an exemption criteria or work requirements. And I think Erin talked a little bit about this earlier. Under House Bill 1893, we reevaluated the interpretation we had of the federal rule, which says that a student must have work study. It's fairly vague. So we are taking the tack under this bill to say that if you have been awarded work study and anticipate getting it, then we will assume that you have met the work requirement. And that has expanded eligibility for a number of students, I think, across the state. This was implemented in July of last year. Next slide. Okay. Oh, I'm a little bit behind, I think. So this is, I think the last thing that I'm going to talk about is really how do we help students understand the eligibility and potentially even make it a lot easier for them to not have to worry about their eligibility. One of the exemptions I just mentioned from work requirements for students is that students who receive a cash benefit under Title IV of the Social Security Act, which essentially is temporary assistance for needy families, are exempted from that work requirement and then could be eligible for SNAP. So in an effort to expand food benefit eligibility to students, this House Bill 1893 also asked us to work in collaboration with Student Achievement Council and the State Board to explore the idea of partially funding Washington College Grant, formerly the State Needs Grant, with some funds, federal TANF funds, which would essentially mean that all students were getting a cash benefit under the TANF program. We looked at this proposal from a number of angles, and first, we did some extensive research around the feasibility of this proposal. So to implement it, we would need to do so in a way that would not be considered cash assistance, but still considered a cash benefit. Because under TANF, if you're receiving assistance, then it would, if you're on the basic food employment and training program, it would push you off of that because you can't be on BFET if you're on TANF. Secondly, it would potentially start what's called the clock. So those students would now have started to use up some of their very limited 60 months of TANF should they ever have to fall into using that. And we didn't want to do that. Secondly, some of the other challenges we ran into is that if we shifted federal TANF dollars to the Washington College Grant, we would need state funding to replace those federal dollars, because TANF is a block grant and it is already fully obligated. And we wouldn't want to reduce other TANF services in order to do this. And that was going to be very difficult for us to push through the legislature. But we could get some support for that. We'd also need to have some pretty robust data sharing agreements with each of the community colleges in order to exchange student level data and be able to support the use of those federal dollars there. We would need to create a reimbursement program so that we could be ensured that students still met the sort of broad framework of TANF eligibility in order to ensure that we weren't just giving it to people who were ineligible. And then there was all of the administrative burden of trying to monitor all of that work in a way that would allow us to continue to use those federal fundings. And essentially going through some of that process, what we figured out is that it would be really administratively difficult and require a significant level of data to do it. And what we've worked on instead is to work with the community college system, for instance, to expand how we talk about community college programming. Essentially, a student in a program that is intended or will likely lead to employment, it's a fairly vague reference, qualifies for basic food employment and training and would, thereby qualifies for SNAP. So we've been collaborating with the State Board on expanding the way that we determine that program, the way that we determine how their programming fits into the BFET definitions, the basic food employment and training. And our working closely with Erin in particular has been amazing in helping us get through this. And our options really were to try and consider all 2-year and associated short-term credentials that the community technical college system provides as BFET approvable, because all are even transfer credits destined to lead to employment to some degree. And I think I will stop there and transition back to Erin, unless I'm supposed to take questions at this point.
Perfect. Thank you, Babs. Next slide, please. And thank you, Babs, for these overviews and for your continued dedication to all of our efforts to increase post-secondary student access to SNAP. We appreciate you. A couple other things within the community and technical college system that have had statewide efforts recently include one thing that we've implemented was the inclusion of new language in financial aid award letters to make sure all students receiving need-based aid are aware they are potentially eligible for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program and/or other food resources. And this messaging includes directions for them to utilize the Washington Connection online portal to begin the application process, and options, information about their local DSHS community service office, or, and this is most important, I think, connection to either BFET staff or other relevant staff on their college campus to find out more, to receive direct assistance with the Washington Connection application and to connect to other campus and community resources, so building that relationship. Second is what Babs was just referring to in terms of our BFET expansion proposal. And so for those of you that are not as familiar with the Basic Food Employment and Training Program, that's our SNAP Employment and Training Program in Washington. And we need to have a list of state-approved activities that are eligible, basically that meet the work requirement for students. So if they're enrolled in the BFET program, they're meeting that eligibility requirement. And currently, we, to simply state this, include all of our basic education options and any of our professional technical or what we would call vocational degree programs under the Perkins umbrella. They are all eligible activities. So this proposal to expand how we define what is a state-approved activity would include non-vocational 2-year degree programs, apprenticeship, pre-apprenticeship, entrepreneurship preparation, and customized and contract non-credit training that is industry recognized. So truly opening up to a much larger list of opportunities for SNAP recipients to attend post-secondary education within the community and technical college system. So excited to work with DSHS on expanding that and making some more opportunities for individuals. And then finally, which you're going to hear more about in a second, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, is that we've implemented a new statewide navigation model to support the ABAWDs, the able-bodied adults without dependents that were referenced earlier, with access to resources and connections to activities to meet that work requirement, including options for post-secondary education. And this model goes beyond just assisting ABAWDs, but connects any individual seeking help to address food insecurity with campus and community resources, and assist with applying for SNAP benefits as well. So I won't go into a lot more details. You guys are going to hear about that in a second. So next slide, please. It is time for us to hear about some successful campus strategies to impact student food security that are currently underway, including an overview of the ABAWD navigation model and some insights from 2 of our system navigators that are doing work to support students, and many successes, I should say, not some, but many successes in coordinating across the campus and with community partners to impact student food security at both 2- and 4-year institutions. There will be a little bit of time potentially, but maybe not, to answer some questions, but please put questions in the question box as we go for these next speakers. And if we aren't able to get to them today, we will make sure that you guys get some responses. So to get us started, I'd like to turn it over to Kathy Medcalf, who is the program administrator for the ABAWD navigation program with the community and technical colleges. Next slide, please.
Good morning. Thank you all for attending as we move through this challenge that we have to ensure that students find food security while they're in school. The ABAWD navigation model was developed when the SNAP work requirement rules were changed for able-bodied adults without dependents, and Washington State became a pledge state. What that means is that we pledged to serve all ABAWDs regardless of whether they need to meet a work requirement or not. So we agreed to put a program together to support SNAP recipients that are ABAWDs regardless of where they lived and regardless of whether their county had a waiver or not. So we launched the program last year. It's a direct partnership between DSHS and the state board, and then from the state board directly to the community colleges. The program placed a full-time navigator on each CTC campus to provide support for ABAWDs and students with food insecurity. You can see from the graph that there are 3 main components or principal elements of our program: supporting ABAWDs, resource expansion, and then community collaboration. with the idea of reaching out into the community and trying to strengthen the community connections between community resources and the CTCs. Navigators have reached out to make connections in individual communities, putting together a list of resources in order to share with ABAWDs and other people looking for different resources, housing, taxes, all sorts of different things that they might be able to help people with. To date, we have had over 700 referrals of ABAWDs to the CTCs. Referrals began about the middle of March, so we're still in the ramp-up stage, but we have had 700 referrals. In addition, in the last 6 months, navigators have helped over 250 students apply for SNAP benefits through Washington Connection, which is a great step in the right direction. At this time, I'd like to introduce navigators Saidu Alanor from Highline College and Carrie Sutisa from South Seattle College to talk more about what they have been doing as navigators on campus. Next slide, please. And Saido. Saido, we can't hear you if you're talking. Saido.
Yes, can you hear me right now?
Now we can, thank you.
Okay, I couldn't unmute. I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Kathy, and I'm honored to be being part of the Community and Technical College ABAWD Navigators. And what we provide as a navigator is mostly and our goal is actually to create a single point of contact for immediate connection for the ABAWDs and community members who are facing food insecurities in accessing resources that are available for them via warm hands-off to local resources. These services are not limited but included intake assessment, referrals, support in accessing and obtaining the resources that the community and technical colleges offer, and also community partners. In this uncertain time we are facing right now, we make sure that we are available for students, community members, and via email, phone, and Zoom. And we also work with students to access basic food assistance, college food pantries, local food banks, and food employment and training, BFED programs. As a navigators, we provide support to all students to navigate basic food assistance and basic food employment and training programs in order to reduce of students' food insecurity. Also, we provide ABAWDs and appropriate assessment and presentation of variety of options to meet with their individualized and education and employment goals, whether it is a short or long-term goal. Those educational opportunities include basic education, prof-tech, apprenticeship, vocational training programs that are offered in the community-based organizations. We also assist students to actually access SNAP programs, and mostly this Care will be speaking in details. Connection to the local community-based organization and navigators we build a great relationship and collaboration with the local workforce community-based organization that offer employment support services. Our goal as a navigators is to remove all the barriers and make sure that ABAWDs have all the tools and support that is needed to gain high-paying jobs. We also, as a navigators, provide referrals for supportive services for either in the colleges and community partners. And our goal is to understand the ABAWDs and community members or students' unique needs in order to maximize all the resources that will support their career goal. Navigators will provide referrals for those services that will be beneficial, whether those services are federal or non-federal services. We also provide reversal referral for students who need to prove that they are a student at the community and technical colleges. So we also work to collect all the resources that are available in our counties and local, whether federal, non-federal churches, and we keep that and we work together with each colleges. So I'm gonna pass next to Carrie, who will be talking about the food insecurity and applying with the working connection. Thank you. Next slide.
Hi everyone. I hope you can all hear me okay. My name is Carrie Satiza, and I am the ABAWD navigator at South Seattle College. Thank you to Saida and to Kathy for talking to us about the ABAWD program and what we do. I'm going to just talk to you about how we connect students on our campuses to different programs and places to access more options for food security. Though we do see, we can see anyone, students or community members. I'm specifically speaking about the students that we see on campus that are experiencing food insecurity at this point. We are helping as navigators to connect them students to SNAP benefits via the Washington Connection application. We can help students via Zoom or phone conversations to really help them walk through the necessary steps to apply for basic food benefits. A lot of our students are often unaware that SNAP program exists and that they can apply online for benefits. Many times, not only are they confused that this program exists, but really how to access that application. And so we really utilize Zoom and phone to just walk step by step through this basic the basic food application through Washington Connection. As navigators, we also utilize food banks and food pantries on campus to help students with food insecurity. Many of our campus food banks, including South, are adjusting to the remote operations and continuing to serve students. We offer many options for students to access meals and food, such as we personally at South done deliveries. We've just begun doing pop-up pantries, and we've also handed out gift cards to many of our students on campus as a way to really help them through this uncertain time. Not only do we partner with different food banks and farms around to offer fresh foods and shelf-stable foods, we're also seeing double the amount of students that are accessing services currently. Excuse me, one. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. I have, as you can see, we all work from home, so if you can hear my dog barking in the background, apologies. Anyhow, so we have been working with students not only at the food banks and dealing with our food pantry, but serving a lot of students to sign up for SNAP benefits. As students are able to access food pantry information, or food pantry, they're being asked if they would like somebody to connect with them to help them sign up for SNAP benefits and online. Many of the students definitely take us up on that offer. I have worked with lots and lots of students to go through that application because students feel a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear that they're not going to be approved and they're not going to get that relief that they need. So we work with them to help them understand how to apply for that application, what information they need to understand. We also, as navigators, work in collaboration with United Way's Benefit Hub, as well as many other departments on campus, to make sure that we are serving students and community members in the most holistic way possible. We continue to help students and community members find resources for daily living, rent perhaps, doing again, the SNAP applications, and reaching out to different resources that they may need throughout campus and the community, in order to really try to lower the barriers that currently exist for many of our students and community members. Thank you for your participation in this meeting here. I appreciate it. That is all I have for navigators. So next slide, please.
Awesome. This is wonderful work, Carrie and Saito. Thank you for sharing with us today. We appreciate your work, your dedication to individuals experiencing food insecurity. Next, we will hear from Danny Trimble, Director of Workforce and Career Services at Lower Columbia College, where they are doing exceptional work to coordinate across the campus and community to provide resources to students.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me speaking. There's not a lot of feedback here. So as Erin said, my name is Danny Trimble, and I am from Lower Columbia College, which is a community and technical college here in Washington. And so one of the things that I want to share is really what our approach has been in addressing food insecurity for students. And so the one thing that I will share has been that we've been working on this for a very long time, quite a few years, and we've learned a lot along the way. However, as many of you maybe can relate, the situation that we are currently experiencing with COVID has really just kind of broke the boundaries. And so I think that we have been going through a huge learning curve during this time to really see how our systems are working, figuring out where they're not working and where they need to change, as well as just really thinking through what the resources are and how we can be building that culture of support for students. And so with that, I wanted to briefly talk about our approach has really been to provide a holistic level of support for students, particularly around food insecurity. I do want to recognize that this approach is focused really on food insecurity, but there are students, as has been mentioned several other times today, are these things don't happen in isolation, right? That many of our students are also facing other, housing insecurity, for example, homelessness, and a variety of other challenges that are deeply related to food insecurity. So when we looked at really how could we provide, a scalable model of serving our students on our campus, we looked at kind of a few different buckets. And so when we think about how we approach working with students who are food insecure, we have different interventions at different levels. And so thinking through what is that emergency support? So by emergency, really like we're talking about daily emergency. So I do not have food today. And so thinking through what are those levels and services available to students. So some of the things that we do, which many schools also do, but thinking through, we have daily options. So, sandwiches, snacks, things to help a student who shows up that says, I am hungry right now. As well as, prepaid cards for groceries and household items. And then we also have a self-care station in our pantry. So that is freely available for any student. They don't have to register with the food pantry. They don't even have to talk with anyone at the pantry. They can come and they can grab things like medicine, hygiene items, those types of things are freely available. And then that next level of intervention is our food pantry. And this has been a pretty important piece of our approach on our campus to food insecurity. We actually were able to continue this. We didn't miss a beat with COVID. We were able to do food distribution throughout this time. We have significantly changed what that looks like and what our model is, as have many pantries in our system. We're now more of a prepackaged, here's a prepackaged bag of groceries, as opposed to more of the services that we had before, where we'd ask students, particularly at the moment, what it is that they needed. With that, though, I did want to add that we still have a huge need from our students to have that individualized support. So we are still supporting, students are making weekly requests. That's our process right now. And we have students that have, dietary restrictions. Maybe they have a health condition such as diabetes, or other restrictions, or religious preferences. And so we are able to still meet those. And I think that it's really important for us to be thinking about how are we meeting those individual needs for students. We've also tried really hard to ensure that we're providing extra nutrition during this time, as well as extra support, with household items and things that people aren't able to access. We also do a lot of fresh produce. We have a garden on our campus, and we use the produce from that garden, as well as fresh. We are still doing weekly distribution of fresh things like milk, egg, cheese, and of course the vegetables. So there's a lot that kind of goes into that pantry model, but I also wanted to talk in the navigators just now shared a little bit of what this approach is, but a real key part of our strategy on our campus is ensuring that we're connecting students to long-term support services. So, we're thinking about how can we help you today, how can we help you this week, and how can we help you get through your time with us here. And so things like connecting them to SNAP benefits, also things like unemployment insurance, housing resources, connecting them to these workforce programs such as CFET or Work First, to be able to provide that long-term support and individualized support. Also, especially since it was mentioned at the very beginning, who on our campuses are experiencing the most insecurity, connecting students to resources like emergency and financial aid. Passport to College is a program that connects, former foster youth and unaccompanied homeless youth to services. And so our programs are intentionally designed to encourage these connections to support services. So in many ways, the food pantry acts as a gateway to a lot of these services. Can we have the next slide, please? And so I want to briefly talk about how we're able to leverage resources to build this capacity. Several years ago, when we looked at, we have all these ambitious goals of how we want to support students. We are a very small campus. We are, often challenged with budgetary concerns. And so there are a lot of resources out there to be able to provide these services for students. And one of the things that has been essential for us is building community partnerships. The response within our community has been profound. Initially, when we decided to start our food pantry years ago, the overwhelming support that we got from our community was pretty surprising, to be honest, and has been very consistent ever since then. And so there are definite intentional partnerships that we have developed. And so those have been essential as we think about what can we not provide with our services and how can we connect students to those resources in the community. And our community has really stepped up to be able to provide the support. This was also, I think, really critical during this time of COVID. Being able to, as nearly all of our students were really struggling and continue to struggle with their basic needs, being able to make those referrals, particularly when things are rapidly changing. So we have really strong partnerships and are able to tell students, this week, this is what's going on at this organization, and this is where you can get the support that is needed. We've also had a lot of support from our community just in general. Several years ago, our local newspaper did a fund drive for our campus to be able to help students with basic needs. And as of the last couple of years, and even amid all the financial uncertainty at the moment, we are on track to raise $50,000, which is pretty significant in our small community. We have relationships with a lot of other organizations that are working on food security in our area, and we have a lot of support, from our faculty and staff, provide a lot of financial support. I wanted to just briefly share one thing. I think this is a great example of how we've had so much support. Several days ago, just based on some relationships that we have been cultivating and some donations that we've received, we actually received a pretty significant donation from several local churches in our area. So they are giving us $4,000 to be able to buy gift cards for our students to buy groceries. And so I think that's one example of how we've been able to really tap into our community. And then a few other things I just wanted to briefly mention is that we really looked at how can we coordinate our processes so that students aren't necessarily going around campus looking at all different programs trying to find support, but we've really worked very hard to centralize. So no matter, we have this no wrong door approach. No matter where you go, you're going to get the same information, and it directs you to the same locations to get all of your support. And being able to centralize all of that, I think, is really important when we talk about how are we leveraging the resources we have available. And then, of course, just looking at what are your funding sources. Not all of these are relevant to everybody on the call today, but one thing that we've really looked at is how are we utilizing what we have available to us. The CARES Act, which was available to most higher education institutions, has been incredibly crucial to us during this time of COVID, but it's also been a really great opportunity for us to think about how are we leveraging everything we have available, and how are we helping the students that may not be eligible for all of those sources of funding. Next slide, please. And so really briefly, just wanted to talk about a few things around how are we building awareness and student engagement. And thank you, Jacqueline. Earlier, she talked about how WCU is working on some of these strategies as well, and it's great to get that student perspective. So just the main points, I think, are we've worked really hard to meet students where they are. And thinking about what that looks like during COVID is very different. And so what are the strategies? We've used a lot of strategies to, we have a text message system now where students can literally text and say, I need food. We've been able to help students in emergencies and through crises in that way. And it's been literally a lifesaver, I think, for some of our students. Thinking about reducing that stigma is, thinking about how do you engage students to really normalize this experience of asking for help, and just in general, but the food pantry has been a really key partner in that, and thinking about, what is that experience for students and normalizing it. We've had a lot of great success with students that maybe on the surface, people would not assume that maybe they were facing insecurity. So some of our like student government or some of our athletes coming out and speaking and sharing and using the pantry and using resources available has been really key to, I think, break down some of those barriers. So again, just thinking about like that holistic support, you know, that we're here to provide this resource navigation for food insecurity, that it's not just about necessarily a food pantry, but what are those levels of interventions you can provide. So thank you, Erin, for this opportunity, and I'll be available if there's any questions.
Thank you so much, Jenny, for sharing this excellent approach and model at Lower Columbia. So we have about 10 minutes to closure, so we're going to hear from WSU Tri-Cities and then have a quick wrap up. So I'd like to introduce Jordan Creighton from the Washington State University Tri-Cities. She's the Director of Campus Student Support Services. Thank you, Jordan, for sharing strategies and partnerships. Next slide, please.
Great, thank you for having me, Amy. Thank you for Washington Student Achievement Council for hosting this webinar today about the importance of food security for our college students. I just want to talk briefly about the history of our cupboard, but I'm going to focus primarily on resources and how to really leverage your community partnerships to fund your food banks to be able to find strategies to help support the students more. So our food pantry started off in 2014, and it has been built on those community partnerships from the beginning. We worked with our local Richland Rotary Club to get funding available. So they gave us a $1,000 grant. We were able to purchase some bins, operate a small closed pantry system through the back of my office. And that is what really started off our pantry for the campus. Over the years, it has grown. We now have a full walk-in space available that opened in 2018, which has really expanded access for students, and it has allowed students to be able to access food anytime during normal business hours. So faculty are able to walk students over, staff are able to walk students over, so we have constant access available. In 2018, we also were able to partner with our local food bank distribution, Second Harvest. So this allowed us to be registered as an official food bank within our community and to be able to get fresh, frozen, and non-perishable food items. So this completely expanded the opportunities available for our students. We were able to start focusing more on nutritional needs for our students and working with them to get food as needed to really keep our pantry stocked. In 2019, we collaborated with Lamb Weston. Lamb Weston is a potato and food manufacturer here in the Tri-Cities, and we were awarded a $75,000 grant to help expand the operation of our pantry. It also increased the amount of frozen product available. They are known for their frozen potato goods, so now our students really ultimately have unlimited French fries and tater tots that they might have, which has been kind of a fun twist, and also in terms of the outreach that we've been able to do for them. So next slide, please. So how did we kind of get there, and what are we seeing with our students? Similar to the data that we were presented earlier, we survey our students every year. Last year, we found that 37% of our students find it difficult to meet their daily living expenses, and 7% of our students identify a risk of homelessness. So we know that there is a need for our students. Almost half of our students are Pell eligible, and roughly the same in terms of students who are first-generation students. So many students are experiencing changes in their lifestyle that they are not used to, and so our goal has been to really try to reduce the stigma and to provide access for all students. One major strategy that we have used that I encourage those who are on other campuses to use is during our orientation programming, we walk every single student through the pantry as part of the orientation tours to really demonstrate that the pantry is available to all students regardless of need. Next slide. And so what are some strategies in terms of outreaching? One of the biggest strategies, if you have not already done so, is I really encourage you to work with your foundation offices on your campus so that you can accept monetary donations. This has really changed the framework in how we're able to support our students and work with our community partners. We have been able to work with a lot of businesses because the 85% of our students return to work in the Tri-Cities. So working with our community partners and really demonstrating to them that the students that they are helping are the ones that are going to be giving back to their community in the long run has really helped form these partnerships to allow community food drives to happen, and us to be able to go present how the cupboard is really making an impact in the local community. I provided a couple documents for you all during the handouts. One is just a simple food drive template. We have found that creating this template and giving it to the local businesses in town, that they've been able to easily do food drives or money drives even for us, and to be able to bring it back to our campus very easily because it provided little to no work for them. We also do a ways to support, and so there's a lot of different strategies for different offices around campus who are very interested in supporting the operation. So we talk about different things, like if you're hosting an event on campus, encourage people to bring 2 cans of food as admissions to the event. Same thing with office parties, and also really encouraging the faculty and staff outreach efforts. Some things that we've done on campus to really encourage students leveraging their resource, because we want them to be able to focus on their academics and to reduce that food insecurity, is we've done soup kitchens, so that's open to all students. We have flipped our pantry, where we have taken everything in our pantry and brought it to a different space on campus to try to advertise to different students who don't normally use it. We are one of the places where during our annual giving campaigns for the campus, the Cougar Cupboard has been a place where students and staff and community members are able to donate. Lamb Weston hosted a Friday on campus, so during our finals week, they gave us a variety of French fries. We laid them out, had them cooking for a couple hours, and so students were able to come and get nourishment during the finals week. We partner with our student organizations and clubs, and they host food drives for us. And we do meal kits as well. So during midterms and finals week and during spring break, kind of periods of time where students are in high stress or they may not have as much access, we try to create kits that can provide a healthy meal options for them for an entire week at a time. As we are going to this next school year, we realize that there's going to be a lot of different challenges and opportunities for us to kind of change the way that we are supporting students. One of those is really, how are we going to be supporting our students who may be impacted by COVID-19 and are required to quarantine, and how are they going to continue to have access to food? And so we're looking at doing warm meal deliveries for those students, doing specialized meal kits that we can drop off specifically to those students. We're also looking at how do we help those students who are not immediately within our area and over an hour further away. And so looking at partners across the state and trying to assure that our students are getting food. We're a little bit delayed on time today, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk with you about different strategies about working with community partners and raising funds for your cupboards.
Thank you so much, Jordan. This is Amy again. We're grateful to you and to all of our campus presenters for offering some excellent ideas and approaches that other campuses and partners hopefully can learn from. Ellen, please advance 2 slides. So we'd like to wrap up our webinar with a few opportunities for you to support students with food security. So first, we'd like to share a new communications toolkit, or preview it, that we'll be offering to campuses to assist campuses in outreach to students about food assistance. So why would we offer a food messaging toolkit? So we know from the data that we've talked about today that only a small percentage of potentially eligible students are applying for aid. Even though our state's working to increase access for students, and even though there are many programs and staff on campus, such as those we've heard from today, that are offering on-campus and off-campus resources. So as we've heard, and as research shows, the ways we message food assistance matters in 3 key ways we want to emphasize. So we need to have messaging that reduces stigma about food insecurity and about seeking help. We need to make sure that messages don't overwhelm with details and that students don't, disqualify themselves. And also, it's really important for students to get connected to a trained person on campus. Who that is on your campus, it looks different on each and every campus. But it's important that students connect with a person who can help them navigate, answer questions, and assist with other basic needs issues that may be coming up for them. So to support campuses in this messaging challenge, the Student Achievement Council has partnered with the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges to offer campuses a food messaging toolkit, and that's a communications toolkit available to campuses coming in August to be able to help get the word out to students about food assistance available. We're integrating feedback that we've received from multiple reviewers of this draft toolkit from 2- and 4-year colleges, public and private, including student leaders. And we're going to be rolling this out to campus staff, faculty, and administrators in mid-August. And you'll see it at that time. Please advance 2 slides. So I just want to wrap up with a few upcoming events to keep us all working toward the common goal of supporting post-secondary students' basic needs. You have them listed here. We have a learning community on supporting students experiencing homelessness that will continue on August 20th. We will have an advisory group on supporting post-secondary students' basic needs. That will happen in early October. And as you've heard today from DSHS, Babs Roberts, campuses that wish to offer EBT on their campuses can go through an application process, and DSHS has generously offered to assist campuses that would like to apply to be able to offer that on their campuses. A lot of campuses aren't thinking of this right now due to remote learning, but however, that application does take some time. So we are working with DSHS to coordinate assistance to interested campuses later this fall. So in our follow-up email message to you after this webinar, we'll include this information, and we'll be asking you whether your campus would be interested in EBT retailer application assistance later in the fall. So you can find this information and registration for upcoming events, as well as past webinar recordings at the WASAC Student Supports page. And we're going to include all this in a follow-up email to you. To wrap up, I just want to thank all of our excellent presenters today. We're grateful for your incredible work and for sharing information and expertise with us today. We will be sticking around for another 5 minutes. If there are questions that you want to type in the box, we'll be able to answer. And we look forward to hearing from you all. Thank you so much for participating today.